To all of my NBA fans out there, all of my other Utah Jazz fans out there, I have came to terms, I've came to peace, and I realize that it is inevitable that Donovan Mitchell will no longer be a part of the Utah Jazz organization moving forward, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's today, whether it's next week, however long it may be. I've came to terms with it. Donovan Mitchell is gonna get traded. This is the best thing for both sides. And in this video, we're gonna be specifically talking about one of the biggest markets in all of sports, and the biggest sports franchise in the NBA with the New York Knicks. The top headliner, and all of the rumors have been centered around Donovan Mitchell and the New York Knicks. We're gonna be talking about that today, why it's right for the Jazz, why it's right for the Knicks, and then I'll also be giving a trade package at the very end of the video, my personal one that I think is gonna be realistic as well too. But let's get into today's video. So let's talk about why the Utah Jazz would do this. It's simply off the fact that the Utah Jazz are clearly headed in a different direction. After 3 consecutive playoff meltdowns by Quinn Snyder and the Utah Jazz organization, due to some injury, but also just due to a lack of coaching and a lack of accountability held, which is not a part of this video, the Jazz decided to move in a different direction. Quinn Snyder, the second winningest head coach in the Utah Jazz's history, was let go, and Will Hardy, the assistant to the head coach of Ime Udoka in the Boston Celtics, was brought in on a 5-year head coaching contract, now the youngest head coach in the NBA. And then the Utah Jazz and Danny Ainge moved on from Rudy Gobert, a 3-time All-NBA team player, a 3-time All-Star, and a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, one of the greatest defensive players in NBA history. They got an absolute haul for Rudy Gobert, and the Utah Jazz were able to get a haul that was going to set the NBA world and the NBA trade value market on fire, in order to make guys like Kevin Durant and Donovan Mitchell nearly impossible to trade with the value that Rudy Gobert provided, in order to acquire Patrick Beverley, in order to acquire Jared Vanderbilt and Malik Beasley and Walker Kessler, the center out of Auburn this year, including 4 future first-round picks from the Timberwolves as well. The Jazz then continue to revamp with young talented players in order to acquire Taylor Horton-Tucker and Stanley Johnson from the LA Lakers, trading away Patrick Beverley as well just a couple of days ago. The Utah Jazz are clearly headed in a direction of a rebuild in order to acquire young talent and acquire an immense amount of draft capital for the future of this team moving forward. Guys like Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley and Bojan Bogdanovic do not fit the timeline and the roster construction for what Danny Ainge and what this Utah Jazz team is moving forward. So it's time to move on from Donovan Mitchell and give him that respect and say, we're going to allow you to go, even though you just signed a 5-year Supermax contract and he still has 4 years remaining on his contract. That's why the Jazz should trade him. Now, why should the New York Knicks make this trade? The first and foremost reason that the Knicks should make this trade is because Donovan Mitchell is a homegrown New York kid. This guy roots for the New York Mets. He's constantly showing up out at games, and that's his home. That's his second home at the end of the day, even though he's got a home right now in Utah. New York is his home, and the Mecca and the Garden and the allure of being in New York, playing at Madison Square Garden in front of those fans that sell out every single night, no matter how good or no matter how bad the Knicks are. Donovan Mitchell on that stage, night in and night out for 41 games a season, would be something special to see. The second reason the Knicks should trade for him is because the New York Knicks are trying to acquire talent and acquire superstar talent since the days of Carmelo Anthony. But essentially my entire life and childhood of growing up and watching the NBA, the New York Knicks have been a horrible basketball team. To put it plain and simple, they still sell out. It's still the Mecca, it's still Madison Square Garden, but excluding really a couple of good seasons here and there with guys like J.R. Smith and Carmelo Anthony, maybe Julius Randle and R.J. Barrett, and that New York Knicks team that had a defensive, backbone to their identity, that just went to the playoffs, into the 2021 NBA playoffs, and they got gentlemen swept by Trae Young. The Knicks have really been irrelevant outside of the fact that they're just New York. So acquiring a guy like Donovan Mitchell to help bring that superstar ability and allure to New York, get New York fans hype and say, we are back, baby, that would be something special to see, and the Knicks need that to have Donovan Mitchell pair up with newly acquired Jalen Brunson as well too, and Donovan Mitchell can help attract superstars potentially to the Madison Square Garden and Worldwide West, and the rest of this front office can move forward with this team. Now, the Utah Jazz do not have their hands tied behind their back. Donovan Mitchell is not in the last year of his contract. So the Jazz don't have all the leverage in the world, but they have a majority of the leverage in this, regardless if you like it or not. So when it comes to the actual trade package, I think that Danny Ainge and the Utah Jazz, at bare minimum, will be starting off with 3 players, and those 3 players are going to be Quentin Grimes, Obi Toppin, and Cam Reddish. I think that is a bare minimum. That is the baseline. That is what we're starting with. And then for luxury tax and salary cap reasons, you're going to have to throw a Derrick Rose or an Evan Fournier in there on their contracts because of the extra $13 million that needs to be met in order to acquire that deal. And whatever the Jazz want to do with those veteran players is something that they can handle in that trade package. Then you're going to throw in future draft picks. The New York Knicks have 13 future first-round picks in the next 3 seasons. In 2023, 2024, and in 2025, they have 13 future first-round picks. The New York Knicks are going to have to give up, I would say, at least 5 of those in order to acquire Donovan Mitchell. I understand that the Jazz do not have all the leverage. I understand that the New York Knicks don't have all the leverage either, too. It's somewhere in the middle, but the Jazz hold more leverage in this under the circumstances that they have a guy who's under contract for the next 4 seasons. They have a guy in which they just traded away Rudy Gobert, and they got an absolute massive haul for Rudy Gobert. I'm not saying that the Knicks are going to be giving up Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett and 7 first-round picks. That's not what I'm alluding to. I'm saying that the baseline is going to be that they're going to give up 3 good, young, core foundational assets in these players in Toppin, Reddish, and in Quentin Grimes, and they're still going to give up 4 or 5 first-round picks in the future of this team moving forward. That's just where I see it. I think that's a realistic trade, and I do think that that's going to be something that's going to incentivize the New York Knicks in order to acquire Donovan Mitchell, acquire one of the best young guards in the game, and try to make something happen. I think Knicks fans are tired of waiting for a superstar to come to New York, and I think that they're tired of all the Donovan Mitchell rumors. They want to acquire Donovan Mitchell. And the thing is, the Knicks are not going to acquire Donovan Mitchell unless they give up the sun, the moon, and the stars in order to get him. That's just my personal belief on it. Danny Ainge will not bite on that. And I just believe that the Utah Jazz are going to get favorable compensation in order to get Donovan Mitchell off the books, and they're going to get an absolute haul from the New York Knicks if the New York Knicks are going to be the team that's going to trade for Donovan Mitchell, as they should. Now, where would this leave the Jazz moving forward if this trade was to go through? The Jazz would have an immense amount of young players and talent. That means that the Jazz would still probably have to move on from guys like Jordan Clarkson, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Mike Conley this NBA offseason as well, too. And the Jazz are just going to continue to build on young players and young draft assets moving forward. And then with the New York Knicks, a lineup with Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, and Mitchell Robinson. That is a very solid and great young lineup. I like the potential and the skill set and versatility that lineup has, but that's still not going to be a top 5 team in the Eastern Conference. They're going to be a very competitive team night in and night out. I don't see that team making a conference finals run, and I would have no problems rooting for Donovan Mitchell because I love that man. I've met the man. He's a great young kid. I love Donovan Mitchell. I have no grudges against him, but if I'm just being completely honest, that's not a top 5 team in the Eastern Conference. I would still take teams like the Boston Celtics, like the Brooklyn Nets, like the Milwaukee Bucks, like the Miami Heat, like the Philadelphia 76ers to still beat them in a 7-game series. Then you throw in teams like the Cleveland Cavaliers are still getting better. The Atlanta Hawks are still a very good basketball team. There's a lot of things that are up in the Eastern Conference right now, and I'm just not sure that Donovan Mitchell makes the New York Knicks contenders right here, right now, in a loaded Eastern Conference when healthy. Donovan Mitchell can help attract other superstars to come to New York and come to Madison Square Garden in future years, but as of right now, the Knicks would not be contenders if this trade was to go through. NBA fans, Jazz fans, Knicks fans, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you think that not only was my trade realistic, because I feel as if that was very realistic considering the circumstances and what the Jazz were able to acquire for Rudy Gobert, do you think that Donovan Mitchell is going to end up being a New York Knick, and when is this going to happen? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. But if you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure you guys drop me a thumbs up. It takes 1 second and it helps me and the channel out tremendously. And if you guys are new here, consider hitting the subscribe bell to stay tuned for more NBA, Jaguars, and UCF content that I do here on YouTube. And if you guys could, make sure y'all go follow me on my socials, especially on Twitter. I'm very active and I'm on there every single day. The link tree will be in the description down below, so y'all can go check that out. But thank y'all again for sticking around throughout the whole video. Brett James, aka BJ, I'm out, y'all. Peace!